Ou alors, je vais demander, bon, Rebecca, normalement, Rebecca, c'est bon. Tu as signé en anglais,
Oui.
en anglais-français. Donc, a priori, c'est OK. Donc, je laisse Ibrahima prendre la parole. Merci.
Bonjour à tous.
Bonjour, Ibrahima.
Bonjour Antonio et Massa qui
Good
m'ont
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to Antonio and other people who have spoken before me. It's a privilege to be here this afternoon. I think we've already dealt with a lot of aspects. So I'm going to deal with the political processes and dialogues and institutional fights which have helped us to reach finance, politics, and law. In Mali, we need to recognize that the financial situation is complicated. I'll begin with the colonial period. During colonialization, there was a colonial guideline, in a way, which said that the land was a belonging of the state. So it was a sort of depossession from the farmers and from their rights. They wanted to minimize the rights of communities and deprive them of their legitimate rights during this colonial period. Unfortunately, at the end of colonialization, the post-colonial states said that at the end of colonialization, no African state, including Mali, but I don't know a single African state in which communities have rights over the land. These rights are recognized by the laws in the country. The land still belongs to the state. That's something that's been very violent for communities, because post-colonial states imagined that communities couldn't give a value to their land. For example, in the 60s, Mali had 1 million inhabitants, but now there are more than 20 million, so it's completely different.
Il y avait trop de terres vacantes, il y avait trop de terres sans maître, il y avait trop de terres qui ne pouvaient pas être mises en valeur par les communautés. Donc, qui ne pouvaient pas défricher des très grandes superficies.
Communities who didn't have the resources to work the land.
Qui pouvaient permettre de les nourrir tout en préservant la. Ces lois uniques, je dis, hein, pendant post-coloniaux, qui ont été les principaux problèmes contre lesquels nous avons commencé qui ont créé une prise de conscience.
So these post-colonial laws a main problem, and we tried to raise awareness about them, but they're not the only problem we were faced with. Other problems that we had conflicts. We can't idealize everything by way of farmers. There are conflicts between communities as well.
Il y avait des crises entre des communautés d'éleveurs, d'agriculteurs, de pêcheurs, les usagers.
There were crises between farmers, fishermen. Users of the earth often fought for the land.
Le premier dialogue que nous avons ouvert avec l'État au niveau du Mali, c'était
the first dialogue that we had with the state in Mali happened in the 80s at a meeting with the Minister of Agriculture. We asked for a legal framework to solve the problems that we were experiencing. But people didn't listen to us at the time.
Souvent, trop de pouvoir. Et donc, abusent de ces pouvoirs-là.
They abuse their powers. That's not how we can be listened to. We can't change things from one day to another. Imagine that this started in 1985, but the law wasn't passed until 2010, so that took a lot of time and a lot of work. At the beginning of the 2000s, we looked at the financial situation and did a study on the land in Mali to see what was happening with the management of funds with communities. And we found out a lot of information. Information that was important to everyone.
Et qui arrivait à la justice et qui n'était jamais réglé par la justice, qui pouvait traîner pendant 20 ans, 30 ans de détention.
Excuse-moi, Ibrahima, il y a quelques problèmes de connexion. Je
Oui.
vais demander aux gens de couper leur caméra. Ça peut-être que le flux sera plus facile et on t'entendra mieux. Merci.
Ok, je peux continuer?
Oui, tu peux y aller, vas-y.
Alors, vous m'entendez? Ok, donc je dis qu'il y avait une forme de détention où certaines, dû à l'histoire de certaines régions, certaines familles
The history of certain regions, family
dont ils menaient l'usage, notamment à des groupes de pastoralistes, des éleveurs. Et donc, c'était des formes de latifundisme qui n'étaient régies par aucune loi du moment, mais qui étaient acceptées par l'État, l'État postcolonial. Pour nous, ce n'était pas acceptable que des gens monnaient les droits
It wasn't acceptable for us.
Donc, on a sorti beaucoup d'informations et
So we got a lot of information, and
et nous avons commencé à rapprocher
on
le
that
gouvernement
basis,
pour
we
expliquer qu'il fallait
began to approach the government to say that we need to move towards regulation to solve these problems of conflicts and better give rights.
Les politiques de l'Autriche qui considèrent que ça appartient à l'État, alors que tout le monde sait que ce n'est même pas possible. Donc, reconnaître réellement des droits aux communautés, les droits des exploitations paysannes familiales, et donc et reconnaître les droits à tous les autres usagers, qui sont les pasteurs, les éleveurs, les pêcheurs. Donc, tous ces gens ont des droits sur la terre. Donc, essayer de reconnaître les droits de toutes les composantes.
We wanted to recognize all community members' rights over the land in creating a system.
Mais en gros, à un moment, nous nous sommes dit, la terre n'est qu'un élément de tout un ensemble, qu'est la politique qui régit le développement du secteur rural, donc la politique agricole. Donc, nous sommes dit, il faut peut-être avoir une réglementation cadre d'abord, qui en tout ce qui concerne les problèmes qui handicapent le développement des communautés rurales, pour qu'on puisse spécifiquement aller plus tard sur la politique agraire, la politique foncière. Donc, en 2005, le gouvernement a accepté notre proposition d'élaborer une loi foncière, une loi d'orientation agricole. Donc, cette loi d'orientation agricole a été un grand moment de mobilisation où nous avons...
This law was a large mobilization movement that said that we would contact all of the communities.
On a synthétisé et on a essayé d'amener des propositions.
We listened to everyone and brought proposals for an agricultural financial proposal in the form of a law in 2006. In this policy, we announced that a financial law would be drawn up to deal with these very sensitive problems of agricultural funding. That was in 2006. In 2008, we had the food crisis.
Des pays du Sud, notamment les problèmes d'accaparement de terres dont Massa a parlé. Donc, le même gouvernement qui avait accepté qu'on élabore une loi foncière agricole s'est engagé dans l'accaparement des terres, a commencé à donner des milliers d'hectares de terres à l'Office du Niger, notamment, qui est une zone où on peut irriguer avec le fleuve, a commencé à donner des baux, bon, ce n'était pas des en vérité, mais quand même, c'était des contrats sur plusieurs années qui étaient donnés à des groupes, souvent même que personne ne connaissait. Donc, c'était extrêmement violent parce que sur ces terres-là vivent des communautés. Et donc, leurs droits, ces communautés n'étaient pas reconnues comme des êtres humains, simplement à travers ces contrats-là. Mais nous avons dit que ce n'est pas possible. C'est là où nous avons cette lutte contre le grand accaparement des terres a commencé. Mais à côté de cela, on voyait émerger aussi ce qu'on peut appeler le petit accaparement des terres qui est dû du fait des élites urbaines, notamment les fonctionnaires, les commerçants, les hommes d'affaires, tous ceux qui ont de l'argent en ville, qui veulent acheter des terres pour faire des fermes, ont commencé à aller acheter des fermes avec certains membres des familles paysannes. Ok, je vais parler un peu moins, parce qu'on n'a que 10 minutes, on doit expliquer un monde, vous savez, c'est compliqué. Et donc, il y avait ce petit accaparement du foncier qui était le fait des élites urbaines politico-administratives qui ont de l'argent, du monde des affaires, qui voulaient acheter des terres pour faire des fermes. Donc, ils ont commencé à aller directement dans les familles paysannes pour essayer de débaucher un membre qui vend une portion de terre familiale sans concertation avec les autres membres. Ça a amené une complication. Donc, ce phénomène a commencé à devenir très important. Et donc, nous nous sommes dit, il faut aller vite, sinon on va pouvoir...
So we thought we needed to act quickly to avoid a catastrophe.
Déposséder de toutes leurs terres, parce que ces gens qui sont en ville ont des moyens importants. Et même quand les familles se plaignent après que ce n'est pas de façon collégiale que la terre a été vendue, quand ils arrivent au tribunal, ils ne gagnent pas. Et c'est dans nos pays, vraiment, il y a tout sauf une justice qui préserve les droits des plus vulnérables. Donc, on a dit, il faut qu'on aille très rapidement. Donc, on a commencé à faire beaucoup de travail.
So we needed to work very quickly. We started to do a lot of work to speed up the process of developing an agricultural financial policy.
Cette politique a été élaborée en 2014.
And when this policy was written up in 2014, it gave the vision
un patrimoine commun de la nation.
funds from
Et les autres détenteurs du pouvoir foncier assurent un accès équitable et sécurisé à l'ensemble des usagers. Donc, c'était quand même important, cette vision, qui est de dire, oui, on reconnaît que l'État a sa place, on reconnaît que certaines familles, certaines communautés, certaines ont des droits sur des terres extrêmes, mais tous ces gens devaient se mettre ensemble pour assurer un accès équitable à tous. Donc, ça, c'était la vision que nous avons pu cristalliser.
So that was the vision that crystallized in the policy to be able to move towards during
Donc, c'est un travail de plusieurs semaines, mois.
So that was work that we did over several weeks and months.
Les différents ministères, très détaillés, pour régler, on voulait même aller pour faire même l'économie des décrets d'application sur certaines choses. On avait bien explicité, mais malheureusement, comme vous savez, il y a beaucoup d'intérêts contradictoires dans ces genres d'enjeux. Et quand on l'a mené au niveau du gouvernement, il y a beaucoup de ministres qui se sont opposés.
Ibrahima, il y a un souci avec ta connexion. On t'entend un peu coupé. Je ne sais pas si c'est possible.
Certains articles leur posaient des problèmes. Donc on s'est retrouvé avec 5. Ok, j'essaie d'aller doucement. Et donc, on a commencé à faire un travail avec ces différents ministères.
We started to work with these different ministers to raise awareness in the parliament and with parliament. We had dialogue with the National Assembly
Donc, pour qu'ils comprennent les enjeux.
and tried to train them in what was at stake for peace and to live together.
Explosive un peu partout avec ces achats des petites portions et ces grands accaparements.
Je suis désolée, Ibrahima, mais ça coupe vraiment. Ça coupe vraiment trop.
Donc, il fallait aller vite pour avoir...
Je suis désolée, mais ça coupe vraiment beaucoup. On t'entend un mot sur deux. Je ne sais pas si tu peux aller dans un endroit un peu mieux. Tu nous entends?
Bon, je n'ai que cette connexion, malheureusement. Oui, moi, je vous entends parfaitement. Je vous entends parfaitement.
Là, on t'entend bien. C'est bon, là. Tu voulais conclure, Ibrahima?
Would you like to conclude?
On ne t'entend plus du tout, là.
We can't hear you anymore. Hello?
Alors.
Ok, donc je vais essayer de travailler de sensibilisation. Je ne devait pas disparaître de cette loi.
Je suis désolée, Ibrahima, mais en fait, ça coupe. Il y a toute une partie qu'on ne vient pas d'entendre là. Ouais, je suis désolée. Ce que je propose, c'est que, en plus, ton intervention, on l'attendait vraiment avec impatience. C'est qu'on puisse.
We were really looking forward to it,
On fait des interviews et des vidéos
but we
de
can
lutte, de stratégie,
interview
de
you.
mobilisation. Et on attend des participants aussi qu'ils puissent nous faire remonter des pistes de personnes à interviewer. Et donc, on peut faire ça avec toi et diffuser auprès de tous les participants et sur les
We can
chaînes
interview you and share the videos with all the participants and YouTube channels. And we can give you a bit more time because 15 minutes isn't that long for what you have to say. It's a bit difficult here for the participants and the interpreters with the connection. So if you think that's okay, we will pause here and give you an interview so you can better explain what you've been talking about. And we can move on to the next speaker. I'm very sorry to have to stop here, but it's very complicated to understand you. Okay, no worries. Thank you. Thank you, sorry. So Veronique says it would be very interesting to record an interview, and I think lots of people would like to have better quality to be able to hear what you're saying. So we'll get that set up very soon. Thank you. Now I will move on to Cécile, who is connected. And she's going to join us to conclude the speakers.
J'aurais plutôt envie de réagir à ce que je viens d'entendre plutôt que.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Je voudrais faire du lien. Déjà, juste pour dire que, comparé par rapport au témoignage du Mali,
I just wanted to say that
très administré depuis très longtemps, en fait, y compris sur la question de la terre. Et beaucoup de choses ont été faites par notamment la
we've done lots of things. Everything was mapped out at that time. We knew who all the land belonged to. There was a very patriarchal approach to managing land.
Que les femmes aient accès aux terres. Pour faire très, je vais essayer de faire très court.
I'll try to be quite quick.
Pour la faire très court,
So to be quick,
que ce soit la propriété ou l'usage, on va revenir comment on différencie les choses de notre point de vue, en tout cas en France. Que ce soit la propriété ou l'usage, la question des terres, elle doit sortir du marché. On considère qu'il n'y a pas de place au marché si on veut établir des politiques agricoles, alimentaires, et surtout dans un esprit de déploiement de la souveraineté alimentaire, on ne peut pas se permettre que les terres soient aux mains du marché. Et en fait, malgré un État très réactionnaire du point de vue à appliquer le droit de propriété qui est très très fort en France, malgré tout ça, à leur sortie de la guerre, alors, comme Antonio l'a dit tout à l'heure, se met en place, même s'il y avait eu des prémices avant-guerre en fait, en France, il se met en place un réel équilibre des rapports de force entre la propriété et le droit d'usage. Ça, c'est très important. Alors, dans le jargon en France, on appelle ça le c'est grosso modo les liens qui lient les paysans, ceux et celles qui travaillent la terre et ceux qui sont propriétaires.
The French jargon says that farmers are people who are owners of land and people who work the land.
Des terres que je cultive qui sont à d'autres propriétaires. Et ça, c'est très très puissant et ça équilibre.
Very powerful.
On pourrait appeler le droit au travail par rapport au droit de
We
propriété.
can call this balance the right to work with regards to the right to property. We regularly see this threatened with draft bills.
Et je pourrais témoigner d'il y a très peu. Hein, je rencontre
I can say
dans
that
le département il y a 2 jours, dans les suites d'une occupation de terre que nous avons entamée avec le soulèvement de la terre dans le Jura, qui nous a sorti un exposé sur le droit de propriété assez incroyable et que je pourrais
we
qualifier
recently saw quite an incredible report about the rights of property.
dans le débat politique. Et ce préfet quand même, hein, qui a fait les écoles, l'ENA et tout ça, découvre que oui, le droit d'usage est au moins aussi puissant que le droit de propriété en France et que je le qualifie souvent comme le plus grand conquis social de la paysannerie en France. En même temps, alors très vite après-guerre, hein, ça va accompagner en fait quand même, tout ça accompagne quand même dans une logique d'accompagnement des politiques agricoles. On se dit très vite, ça ne suffit pas de régler les liens entre la propriété et les usagers. Il faut s'intéresser quand même au prix des terres. Ce qui fait qu'on a un outil assez puissant qui comporte bien des soucis, mais enfin, on a quand même un outil assez puissant qui est quand même le contrôle du marché des prix en France. Comme on est très administré, c'est ce que je disais au début de mon intervention, on a tous les outils qu'il faut et actionnables pour pouvoir contrôler ce marché. Il y a un monopole de la vente des terres en France, enfin même de toute propriété qui est supportée par les notaires et qui permet de concentrer toutes les connaissances de vente des terres. De toute façon, comme c'est très administré, à chaque fois qu'on vend un bout de terrain, l'État est informé, puisqu'il y a un impôt qui est prélevé sur ces ventes de terres. Et donc, c'est dans les années 60 est instauré ce contrôle du prix. Et du coup, à partir du moment où on contrôle le prix, on contrôle le marché. Et quelque part, à partir du moment où on contrôle le prix et on contrôle le marché, finalement, on sort de la logique de marché. L'outil, pour ceux qui connaissent, si on utilise les termes, c'est l'outil SAFER. Alors, ce qu'on peut, avec le recul, est assez contestable, c'est que c'est fortement et concentré par une gestion éminemment corporatiste, ce qui consiste à pas mal de défauts. Mais bon, ça suffit pas. Ça suffit pas d'équilibrer les rapports entre les propriétaires et
So this isn't enough to balance the relation between the owners and the users, or controlling the price of the land, but we also need to interest ourselves in the way that the land is distributed. How do we control the land, the size of the exploitations? And we've been thinking about this since the 60s. But is there still a control of the price of the land? We have a bit of control over the price of the land, but it's been a total failure for the control of the distribution of the land in France. Because we can see 60 years later that we have a concentration of ownership of the land very extreme in France. Even though we've had a historic will to distribute the land equally among peasants and farmers, it's been total failure. And this obviously creates a social problem because distribution of land is a social necessity for peasants to allow the workers, to give the workers regulatory tools. And for the population in general, it's a food necessity. The more we concentrate the land in fewer hands, the more vulnerable we become in terms of food production. And at the scale of humanity, it's more of an ecological necessity. It's also an ecological necessity because to deploy an ecological project in France, or an organic project, or a peasant project, which means redeploy cultivated diversity, this needs a lot more hands than brains to cultivate the land. And agroecology will not be able to be achieved without real agricultural policies to accompany it. It would be paradoxical to think that. So to create the link with what Antonio said, and also what Wassa and Ibrahim said, I'd like to react notably to what Antonio said. Yes, today, in France at least, I don't really know the tools in other countries, but in France, the peasants represent only 2 or 3% of the population. So we're actually we're an ultra minority in France, and obviously to have to weigh in the overall strength rapport in France, then we're quite at a disadvantage.
Tu as dit, Antonio, tu as cité
Antonio, you also cited the struggle of Notre-Dame-des-Landes, which at the start was a struggle which was started by urbanites or urban people, which was, you know, they was worried about struggling against a new world that was being created with excessive air travel and all this kind of stuff. And through this prism of struggle, it actually created an installation, or it actually allowed urban people to install themselves in a rural area. And now these occupants are no longer occupants, they're actually peasants. So this has really taken its form within, or converged. So many movements have converged in the same struggle. And it's like the movement for struggles for land, Notre-Dame-des-Landes, the Nantis in Dijon, the Jardin des Éleveurs in Besançon. Obviously, those who don't know France will not know these different movements, but all of these movements, whether they're urban or rural, are converging. We can see the Peasant Confédération, we can see actors, a lot of organizations are involved. And it's a challenge, it's a major challenge to see what all of these different struggle movements can bring to the table. We have some examples of struggles like of these land revolutions, and it's great because as Massa and Ibrahim were saying, at the same time we have a struggle movement, but also a movement of public education. So it's very powerful because, for example, in Jura, we've decided to start an action of civil disobedience to occupy the land very recently. And if there had only been the Peasant Confederation, if we hadn't had our partners involved, we would have only been a handful. But that day, we were 600 to occupy lands. And I can tell you that in terms of the balance of forces in rural areas, whether it's Besançon or all the different struggles that are involved, we are powerful. We've already achieved victories. Some of them are totally invisible. I mean, we see them because we're involved with syndicates, and we meet with the prefects, and we see what's happening in the rural areas. So it's beautiful, and it helps with hope, and it's also powerful. But we obviously need to succeed in overcoming this level, so to achieve more general social transformation, to preserve our tools in regulation. And then how do we achieve a better distribution of land and a massive return of people to the land? Sorry, I've finished. I think I've used all my time, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Cecilia. I can actually,
différents canaux.
I've actually followed all of these different movements on social media and on the ground, and it is, I agree, indeed, quite powerful movement and a growing movement. Thank you very much. We've got half an hour left for questions, for experience sharing from the participants. I think I'll first of all propose from the participants, I'll ask you to raise your hand. Sorry, I can't open the microphone to all of you because we're not sure if there are still trolls within us or among us. So if you have any questions, I propose that you raise your hands or put them in the chat. I think that Oscar, you already had 2 questions for Cécile. Cécile, I don't know if you saw them there in Spanish. How do you understand the control of the land markets, and how do you separate it from the markets of the price of the land? Maybe someone could translate it better than that. In France at the moment, they're applying. Are they applying the option of the first buying, which had been planned through SAFER? Cécile? Can we give the microphone back to Cécile? I think she's lost access to the microphone. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so well, in 10 minutes, I couldn't go into too much detail of regulations and laws, but there's a whole. We can't control the market of the price of the lands without having tools to control. So, and we can't control the price of land without intervening at some point and to say that the price of land is based on speculation, so that we act through the tool, through the SAFER tool, collective governance tool, to say, no, this is out of order and we don't allow you to sell at this price. So at that point, there are 2 solutions. The main tool which we can use is the right to preemption.
C'est un outil public mais privé. C'est assez particulier, mais en tout cas, la profession agricole et le gouvernement, pour faire très simple, dit, ben nous, comme on n'est pas d'accord avec le prix que vous appliquez, à qui vous allez vendre, parce qu'il y a quand même...
The other option is if we're not in agreement with the price that you're going to sell, so we can stop you from selling, and we can also buy in your place, and we can also make the price drop. If it was the price of the Peasant Confederation, it would be good, but it's actually more in terms of the average prices in the market. So it's always kind of finding the balance between the rights of ownership and limiting speculation. We can't just SAFER, put the price down too low compared to the average price in the market. But so therefore, you need many tools to be able to have this control on the market and on the price of the lands. What I didn't say is that today this has been completely bypassed by the financialisation of the agriculture. These tools work really well when you buy hectares and sell hectares, but when you're not when you then start selling social parts instead of hectares of land, then all these tools become powerless, unfortunately.
Ok, merci Cécile. Je crois qu'il y a eu un petit problème de traduction à un moment donné pour Oscar, mais
I think there was a bit of an issue with the translation for Oscar at some point. Anyway, we'll share in the 4 languages. We'll share the conference in the 4 languages afterwards, and we'll put that kind of commentary in. We'll highlight that kind of commentary. Oliver, I think, raised his hand. We'll give him the floor. Yes, hi. Thank you very much for all the participants for this fascinating debate. I just wanted to say, as a confederate or as a member, to add on what Cecile was saying, she had very little time, about political land reform and their consequences in history, and give a bit of historical context, like Antonio did, talking about Italy. For a time in history, we had managed to counterbalance through the Commission of Structures, which was controlled by peasants in the state, or delegates of the state. We had a commission of these structures which helped to regulate the distribution and the growth of agricultural exploitations. And obviously this was changed by the state to help profit capitalism by creating different tools which allowed larger structures to monopolize the resources. This was just to give extra time to Cecile and to give more precisions. And I would also like to thank Christophe Gaulet, who sends us a message regarding rights of peasants, concerning an article that can be used at the international level, since I'm quite involved in this subject. And also regarding solidarity and land rights issues. It's clear that different states and different countries, obviously in France, we have the sacrosanct right of property, which is inscribed in the Constitution. It means that in some way the rights of usage has been minimized in France already. And also I'd like to thank solidarities that we're creating at national and international level to make people understand the issues and the problems. We won't just gain solidarity through usage rights, but also through environmental problems and food security problems.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I saw that there was a question for Antonio, but I think he responded directly in the chat. Do you want to go on? Yeah, just to be quick, I will answer to Kabir. So, distributive land reform is to limit the total surface area of agricultural exploitation, and it is quite a remarkable political activity because it was the result of actions of popular movements, revolution movements. And at the moment, there's not even a possibility of the process of concentration of use of agricultural lands is stronger there now than what it was before the Second World War. Because in some countries, after the Second World War, we've established a need for distribution of land. The second comment is that some parts of the land still belong to the state. So this would be the easiest part to distribute. But actually, it's been a really difficult discussion because the land reform, or the distribution and land reform, is based on the idea that the private property of land has no meaning. that usage of land is what counts. So the European dogma, for the European dogma, it's quite a difficult discussion to have.
Ok, merci Antonio. Il y avait
Thank you, Antonio.
Goulet aussi qui avait levé la main.
Christophe Gollet also raised his hand.
Vous donner la parole.
Christophe, I'll give you the floor.
J'ai vu que j'ai été interpellé par Olivier Keller.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was asked by Olivier, and I'll react with pleasure, respond with pleasure. Yes, I sent a guide, like a practical guide, which is available in English, in French, and in Spanish. We put it on the chat. It will be given in resources for the webinar. So in this guide, we presented the right to the land as it's recognized by the UN, and also to give practical examples of how it's implemented in some countries. For example, in Colombia, where it's been about 6 or 7 years where the right to the land in the declaration has been used for advocacy at a national level. Also, another information, we're going to create a website with the Via Campesina, the SETIM, and VM International on this declaration. It will be available also in French, in English, and Spanish in about 2 months, probably. Normally, it will be defendingpeasantsrights.org, and you should receive this through Via Campesina and the Peasant Confederation. And the goal is to present this declaration and also all the examples of implementation at national level that exist at a global level in the world. So all the examples, for example, that were discussed today, which are fantastic, can also be presented on this website. You could go through Via Campesina or via the CETIV or through other member institutions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Christophe.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Yes, we will obviously not forget to share all of these resources that were shared in the chat today, and also all the presentations that were given by the speakers. They'll be translated in the 4 languages, and they'll be put made available on the forum's website. So we invite you to go and watch these and to continue participating in discussions around this in the following weeks. I still have 2 hands raised. I think someone wanted to speak. I don't know if Antonio already responded. I also have Emmanuel and Cecile.
Est-ce qu'Antonio a répondu?
Pierre, did Antonio respond to your question? Is that okay for you, or do you have another question? I think it's okay. No.
Mon micro. Merci.
Oh.
Je veux dire intervenir.
I just wanted to intervene. I don't have a specific question to ask, but all the speakers were great. I wanted to thank also the organizer. I already presented a small intervention in the part that was reserved to discussion in the forum. But I just wanted to add or explain or bring to the attention to the members of the forum of a really important question that we are experiencing in Morocco at the moment. It's that when we are assisting to an evolution of the rights of the human rights, especially when it comes to indigenous people, to protect their riches and their resources, we are seeing an attack without precedent against a mode of production, the Amazigh mode of production, which is based on the collective rights of the land. And these values are based on human values, which are manifested in justice, dignity, equal distribution of resources. So I wanted to signal to you the importance of this mode of production which exists or which remains from the colonial forces of the Moroccan people. We currently have 15 million hectares which are collective lands. And we have 14,000 hectares that are forests that were collected. Now they belong to the state. And we also have 5,000 hectares of dominial lands, which means lands that have been recuperated by the colonial powers. So we have about 300,000 hectares which are normally collective or communal. And what remains of the Moroccan territory is private. So we have about what we are seeing currently is a destruction, total destruction through laws. I've already cited the 1762 law, which is really a dangerous law on this mode of production. And we have to take into account of the resistance of the ethnic communities of the Amazigh people since the beginning or for a long time, and also take into account the fact that the Moroccan state has this heritage, this interesting heritage for all of humanity. So to not take too much time, I will use this opportunity to make a call to this forum for, on the one hand, reveal the strategy of the Moroccan government, which is aiming to destroy this cultural heritage of the Amazigh, but also to express your solidarity towards these or against these laws which oppress and intimidate the defenders of human rights. Okay, so it's an appeal that I make to you, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to discuss this later in the forum, and the opportunity to detail more on this. Thank you very much for this, sharing this information and the contribution. You were the first contribution on the forum chat, so we wanted actually to ask you if we could have an interview with you at some point, or or receive a document at some point a bit more detailed that we could share on the forum of the current struggles. So I have 3 more people that have raised their hand.
Et concise.
We only have 10 minutes left, so I hope we can do it in a concise way. So I have maybe we can start with Cécile.
Oui, je voulais, puisque c'est une réunion internationale, d'autant plus le dire, parce que c'est quelque chose que j'ai omis de glisser. Vous m'entendez là ou pas? Oui, parce que j'ai des trucs qui s'affichent sur l'écran. Il y a quelque chose qui n'est pas du tout abordé dans nos lois foncières de répartition, alors même si elles sont fort défaillantes, comme l'a dit Olivier, c'est la question de la liaison entre la question de la gestion des terres et la question du projet de souveraineté alimentaire que nous portons toutes et tous. Et du coup, c'est comment on intègre cette question-là dans nos politiques foncières nationales, européennes et internationales, dans la question de la répartition. Je m'explique. J'ai pas les chiffres, hein, mais ça, c'est les chiffres d'Acter, hein, parce qu'on travaille ensemble par ailleurs. Grosso modo, l'Europe importe 35 millions d'hectares. La surface agricole française, c'est 28 millions d'hectares, c'est pour avoir des idées d'ordre de grandeur. Hein, donc ça veut dire qu'on importe plus que la surface agricole française. Et du coup, c'est de s'interroger comment on peut intégrer ça dans les politiques de répartition foncière, compris à l'échelle nationale. On n'a pas d'idée, hein, pour l'instant, c'est des pistes. Est-ce que ceux qui importent le plus d'hectares en fait dans les systèmes agricoles, notamment en France, c'est tout ce qui est élevage hors sol, notamment. C'est-à-dire que du porc hors sol, du poulet hors sol, qui n'a pas de surface pour nourrir leur propre élevage, forcément, ils importent de l'aliment. Bon, on importe aussi beaucoup pour mettre du carburant dans nos voitures. Hein. C'est pas que l'élevage hors sol, il y a aussi la question des agrocarburants et la concurrence entre l'énergie et l'alimentation. Et voilà, il y a ça à brasser et quelles propositions on peut faire émerger par rapport à ça.
Merci beaucoup, Cécile. Du coup, je propose à Alberto, je pense que c'est Alberto de la Contag, est-ce qu'il est là, de prendre la parole. Voilà, oui, c'est Alberto.
Olá, buenos dias para uns, buenas tardes para os outros e creio que para outros são buenas noches. Me gostaria de, desde Brasil, de la Contag, enviar um saludo a todos os participantes deste extremamente importante fórum de lutas pelos recursos naturais, das lutas pela terra. Me gostaria de abraçar com muito carinho meu queridíssimo amigo Antônio Honorati, a Ibrahim e a todos os que participaram, contribuindo com os paneles. Me gostou muito de escutar as diversas experiências sobre a terra, tanto da Europa, especialmente de Itália e França, e também de alguns países de África. Me gostaria de solamente añadir, porque temos acesso aos documentos, às apresentações, queremos estudá-las melhor para compreender melhor a luta de vocês nestes países. Pero é muito importante que possamos colocar em este debate também o tema allá de la Declaração das Nações Unidas sobre os Direitos dos Campesinos, também a Declaração das Nações Unidas sobre o desenho da agricultura familiar. Os 7 pilares do desenho me parece que são muito importantes que possamos dialogar com esse tema da terra, da reforma agrária, de acesso aos recursos naturais. E, para terminar, chamar a atenção que em todas as partes do mundo este é um tema central, porque a tendência é a grande concentração da terra, dos territórios. E nós temos que formar uma grande aliança de solidariedade internacional para fazer com que a agricultura familiar, campesina, indígena, possa avançar sobre o tema de acesso aos recursos naturais, especialmente sobre a terra. No mais, me gostaria de agradecer muito a participação e dizer que o secretário de Reforma Agrária da Contag, bem como Alonso, não estão presentes neste momento, porque estão com todas as organizações de Brasil, dos movimentos sociais, fazendo uma reunião para uma grande campanha que queremos que depois socializar com vocês, que é sobre o tema da violência da terra que nós estamos levando a cabo aqui em Brasil. Graças.
Merci Alberto. Je suis désolée, il y a quelques soucis
Thank
avec.
you, Alberto. Sorry, there's a few issues with some of the cabins. I'm not sure if everyone had the translation in its entirety. The videos were recorded, and then we'll do the subtitling of all the interventions. If you won't be able to get the translation, we're sorry. The conditions are not necessarily ideal for the interpreters. I'll give one last opportunity for a few people to speak. Emmanuel? Yes, hi, sorry. I'll be brief. I just wanted to share a proposition of law that we made here in Belgium for the Wallon region, inspiring ourselves from SAPA, which I defend and we defend personally, but more adapted to the Belgian context. So I put it in the discussion forum and here also in the discussion form in English and in French. So simply to talk about the local context, which is very capitalistic here. Agricultural lands have attained phenomenal prices here. And these projects of law are trying to find a trajectory, which is what are the social problems that we are aiming for? Obviously, land ownership concentration, land grabbing by banks, by speculation funds, pension funds, and other actors. The third problem is the lack of people to reuse the land. Sometimes these cost between 1 and 10 million to buy the land, and obviously this is due to a consequence of speculation, and we're seeing banks and financial people buying the land. So we're going from a world where we're in a peasant agriculture to becoming an agriculture which is in the hands of free capital and financiers. Obviously, this is creating problems. We are proposing a creation of an organism of agricultural regulation, which would be called ORAF, which would take into account all of these problems that I've talked about, and also 10 objectives like blocking prices, etc. And also it would define our means. How would we achieve this? So we could block sales of agricultural lands with negotiations between the buyers and candidates. And also to respond to Elias's question, also a regulation of the transfer of companies' shares in obviously to avoid the radar of SAPA. Companies are resorting to buying and selling social parts, which is a very big problem. So we can block the buying and selling of social parts to stop companies buying and selling land separately from selling or buying parts of the capital of the company. Obviously, this is a bit of an ideal situation, utopian situation, but we see that we are trying to denigrate the French SAPA. Everyone, even people in the syndicalism environment. This is a campaign to say there's no alternative than free markets. Nothing else in free markets works, but it doesn't work. It doesn't actually work. The less we regulate it, more speculation becomes terrible. And actually, regulation mechanisms and tools are very simple. They exist and not so complicated. But I think there's a political volunteer to say, there's a political will to say it's not possible. We can't do this. It's complicated. But actually, we think civil society can do this, and we must say the land is a common good, and anyone can't just sell land to anyone at any price. And I think it's important to have this organism of regulation to block these things and to block sales and to stop other people from buying and stopping peasants of installing themselves and buying the land. So it's not a dictatorship of the land, it would be a decision that would be decided with the peasants, syndicates, with civil society and training centers, which every year form millions of people, thousands of people, but they don't find land because young agronomists who are not from this world, they can't find land. I also put this information on the forum's website, which I think is waiting pending approval. You can have it in Word, or you can write me at my email address. I'm part of the movement of peasant agricultures in Belgium. We're two organizations that are involved in this. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we can share all of this on the website. I don't know why it hasn't arrived yet. Normally there isn't an approval process. We're going to close this web conference. I'll have to thank all of the participants and the speakers. We invite you to write down in your agenda the closing meeting for this cycle of conferences, which will be in April at the same time. We also invite you to go on the website to share your experience through the forum, through the website, through videos, audios, or even writing comments. And I'll let Fanny give the final closure for this meeting in a brief way. I know that she has a way of doing this. And I'll say thank you for everyone. Fanny, it's your turn.
C'est bon? Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien là? Ouais?
Can you hear me?
Ok. Bon, c'est pas
Okay.
simple parce qu'il y a eu beaucoup de choses.
Okay, so it's not very simple because a lot of things have been said. Thank you very much for all the speakers and participants. It was super interesting. We can really see with all these witness statements that all of these regulatory tools that we've managed to put in place and that we will need to put in place, they haven't been born out of nothing. They've come out of important peasant movements and peasant mobilizations. We've seen that in Europe, this has happened from unemployed people, but it's also converged with social movements in Europe. We've got many examples like Notre-Dame-des-Landes, sur le mandataire in France. And in Africa, it's actually come from the victims of people who have been victims of land grabs, who've also converged with militant organizations and with syndicates. And we now see that throughout the world, the processes are the same. And to obtain tools of land reform regulation, we need struggles. Sometimes these struggles last 20, 30 years to obtain these changes in the politics and in the laws. Everyone has witnessed that land must stay in the hands of the peasants and must stay something. The vocation of land should be for food and not for speculation. And this will actually, we will need struggles, we will need protests, we will need sit-ins, we will need mobilization, important mobilizations to change these changes. The law of land reform in Italy, the safer in France, we can see that even if we have these legal tools, the fight does not stop there. Even in Mali, despite the land reform law, they still have to do an enormous amount of effort in order for this law to be respected.
On le voit aussi en France où le statut.
We see it also in France, where the status of farmers is put into question by owners, and we can also see all the extremes that have occurred with safer. So there's still all this work of the struggle which needs to continue in order to apply these new tools and these new laws and regulations. Whether it's in Mali with customary laws or in Europe with the usage laws, everyone strongly criticizes private property and defends a right to usage. And I think within this forum of global struggles for the rights to the land, I think we need to respect and put forward the rights of usage. I think this is the way that the land rights reform revolution will occur. I think we realize very quickly that with only 2 or 3% of peasants that are still active, we need to converge to have more weight in the debate and to fight against speculation, to fight against the price of the land, to continue to protect and distribute land tenure in the hands of peasants. And I think, as Antonio mentioned the question, it's very important to re-mention this question. What space do peasants, what role and space should peasants have in this dispute and in these new social movement struggles? We can see that we don't have the same position or the same influence or legitimacy as we used to have, but I think we should question ourselves and we should imagine strategies, more aggressive strategies to weigh in more in debate. And we should continue to advocate for our perspective, and we should continue training ourselves in law, and continue to disobey and protect what we have obtained, and to build land tenure rights and policies. We need these politics in order to protect food access rights. At the Confédération Paysanne, we think that the actions on the ground are important, but also active advocacy is necessary to make the law change. And last point, which was noted by our Brazilian colleagues, the repression of peasant movements and land occupation movements. The repression is huge, and I think we need to take the declaration of the rights of the peasants and agricultural workers, that we make this law practical in order to fight against this repression of peasant leaders and peasant revolts. Okay, that's as brief as I could make the conclusion. Thank you very much for everyone. There's been so much that was said, and I think on the website we'll try and take all these notes and put them on there so that you can participate, comment, bring your elements to the table, and bring your experience as well to the debate, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Fanny, et on demande
Thank you, Fanny. And we also ask so that your participation is written on the site. We would like to meet you on the forum of the website. You'll see all the links on the discussion, on the chat, and all the emails that we'll send you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day, all of you. Goodbye.